Joining us now in the studio, Doug Shanks and Vincent Venturini. You go by Vince, though, don't you?
Yeah.
Mostly. Yeah, get closer there. So,
Okay.
and you guys, first of all, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
It is an honor to have you. Doug, I've followed your career a long time and was a resident of Jackson. Certainly at the time you served as a commissioner, you're a baseball coach. You guys collaborated on a book, One Direction Home, which is really, you describe it as a history of South Jackson.
Right.
And I grew up in West Jackson, and we were talking this morning at breakfast. Your son Fred was at breakfast with us, and we were talking about kind of what the line of demarcation was between West Jackson and South Jackson. We always considered Raymond Road there.
Right.
Yeah. Do you agree with that?
No, we thought it was Highway 80.
Okay. You think anything on south of 80?
Yeah.
We thought that was still West Jackson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So
we had things like, what do you do with Westland Plaza? Yeah. What do you do with Shoney's, and what do you do with Provine?
That's all West Jackson.
Yeah.
But it is. But here's another thing.
Okay.
There are the border institutions. Channel 12.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right on the border of West and South. And,
That's true.
And there's blurred lines between West and South Jackson. Now, there were some institutions that we used in South Jackson that were really in the West, like Westland Plaza and Provine High School.
Sure.
But when you start moving around the Robinson Road extension area, out near Channel 12, that was where you weren't sure where South stopped and West started.
I would agree with you on that. I would agree.
All the kids meshed in at Provine, too.
Right.
You know.
And what we called Shoney's, which was making that circle through Westland Plaza and just burning a bunch of gas when it was a quarter a gallon back then.
And your parents paid for it.
That's right. I admit I was part of that.
Well, what this book has done very well. We've been very, very pleased, and it's been really the criticism of it is almost non-existent. I mean, you know, but what it got Vince started doing is doing a book on West Jackson, which is what he's working on now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. But what it's turned into, you know, how you start down one path and then you end up doing something different. But he got into West Jackson, and he ends up doing the ethnic communities of Jackson, the Greeks and the Lebanese. And it's amazing. All of these people were in South Jackson. You know? It's really amazing. And it's had a lot to do with the makeup of the city of Jackson.
Absolutely. Well, my partner, longtime partner, Norman Catoul, Lebanese, of course. And, you know, he's talked a bit about the history of his family. They were among the early settlers of Jackson.
They were.
Yeah. And it was amazing how they were accepted into the community.
Yes,
you know?
Yes, absolutely.
It's you know, the same way with the Jewish community.
Yes,
which
exactly.
Found, you know, they were accepted. And, you know, when of course, you traveled, and all my friends in the Army were from the East Coast and whatnot, and they just couldn't believe that the Jews were accepted as well as they were here. They were, you know, a different world.
Totally agree with you on that. And my father, being in the dry goods business, many of the merchants, of course, were Lebanese and Jewish, and that was his custom.
Exactly.
And my father was Catholic, so they all got along and didn't think about all that sort of stuff.
If you look back at the old newspapers, and I'm talking about going back into the very early 20th century, and even before that, the newspapers talk about when the Jewish temple burned in the 1870s, they built a new one. Oh, our friends of the Faith of David have a new temple. Very supportive of the Jewish community. And the bombings that took place, let's say, of the rabbi's home and of the temple in the late 60s, actually had more to do with black civil rights than anti-Jewish sentiment, because Rabbi Newsbaum had come down from Toronto, and he was very active in civil rights. So that's what, I mean, they targeted him. They blew the front porch off his house, and they blew up a part of the temple. But when you look back at newspaper articles, very favorable toward Jewish populations, Jewish merchants. And when the Jewish temple opened on Woodrow Wilson in 1940, you had the pastor of St. Peter's Catholic Church and the pastor of First Baptist Church there as part of the ceremony. I mean, you know, they actually got Baptists and Catholics together at a time when that wasn't happening.
I don't know that we ever thought about that. Of course, we were talking before we came on the air about St. Mary's, which so I attended. You guys, your families too?
Oh yeah, I went to kindergarten there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I went to grade school. I can't remember when the school itself opened. I want to say it was in the late 50s.
No, it was early
Earlier
50s.
than?
My
Early
oldest
50s?
sister.
Okay.
So I grew up in South Jackson. I always lived on Woody Drive, but we were in St. Mary's Parish when I was born.
Okay.
St. Therese did not open until 1955.
Okay.
And my oldest sister entered St. Mary's first grade in 1952, so it was at least open at that time. And I think probably since the church opened in 1948, the school probably opened within a couple of years of that.
So my parents were among the early parishioners in 1952. I want to say that what they relayed was that Mass was said first in the gym.
That was the original church.
Before the church building itself was constructed.
Right. And, St. Mary's was such a wealthy parish. When they built that beautiful Gothic church, they paid the debt off in 3 years.
That's unbelievable.
It took St. Teresa's almost 30 years to pay off the debt on what was a gym.
And that St. Mary's facility is like a museum. Unfortunately, it closed down a few years ago.
It's sad.
Just matter of fact, Fred drove by there the other day for something, and he said, "What is this out here in West Jackson? This beautiful church sitting out here."
Beautiful.
And I said, "That's St. Mary's. It's where your grandparents went to church."
So many fond memories of going to school and church and all the events there through the years. What a great parish community it was. So I got to ask you, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, Vince was the head of the sociology department, social work at Mississippi Valley, and I was a baseball coach. And occasionally we'd ride to Jackson together, and we just started talking about growing up in South Jackson. And even though I'm an older generation than he is, our memories were almost the same. And we said, well, is this just nostalgia? Or all my contemporaries felt the same way. So one of the days we said, why don't we write a book about it? We were talking about some of the landmarks and whatnot. So it took us about 7 years, but we got it done.
That's
and
awesome.
Vince did the research on the history of South Jackson goes back to almost the Revolutionary War.
Incredible.
And Vince went back and spent a lot of time in the libraries of South Carolina and whatnot, chasing these people down that founded South Jackson. And again, you go back to the Catholic monastery up there on Terry Road.
Right.
That is the oldest building in Hinds County. Now,
Didn't know that.
Well, it's the oldest house and oldest residence in South Jackson.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right, in Jackson, period. Yeah. A lot of people don't think of it as a residence because we know it as the monastery.
Right.
But it was a plantation house. And,
Didn't know that.
The Morant family, who were descendants of French Huguenots who came to America, built the house when they came to get some of the free land after the Treaty of Doak Stand.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the Catholics ran the Huguenots out of France and they came here.
yeah.
So this had to be quite the ride down memory lane for you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
very much.
Yeah, when we get into the schools section, it really is, because the World War II crowd, when they came back, it was nothing good enough for their kids. They were going to have the best educational system. And Jackson at that time was growing, booming, and they built a school system here that was unbelievable. And that's what's so sad now.
Yeah.
I mean, Provine and Murrah, those were prep schools.
Unbelievable schools.
Public schools.
And unbelievable athletics,
as
you recall.
Yeah.
Provine
Everything.
especially was really good. I mean, not taking anything from Murrah, but there was a period of time there in the 60s at least where Provine was incredible.
Yeah. Well, the National Merit Finalists and the Presidential Scholars and, the band and the musical comedies and, it's just incredible.
Yeah. It was unbelievable. So I grew up in the neighborhood with the Flints.
Yeah.
Johnny and Bobby Flint,
right.
Of course. Bobby went on, got drafted by the Reds.
Right. Played a couple of 3 years.
Yeah.
And, Bobby had a great career up at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And a wonderful person. And get good fit. Their daddy was with the Parks and Recreation Department.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just nice people.
Actually, their daddy was with the phone company. Was with Mr. John Flint, was with the phone company. Bobby, with the son who played for the Reds, was with Jackson Parks and Rec.
That's right.
And so Mr. Flint was with the phone company. When it was downtown, he went downtown every day to go down there and where the operator switches and stuff. Can you gentlemen hang around for another segment?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we got more we can dig through.
If it's okay when you're retired.
I understand. That's fantastic. We got Doug Shanks and Vince Venturini in the studio talking about their book, One Direction home and just enjoying the memories of South and West Jackson. Stay with us. Middays will return. SuperTalk Studios, we've got Doug Shanks and Vince Venturini, co-authors of the book One Direction Home. It is a history of South Jackson. So one of the things, Doug, you were saying off the air was when you were doing the research for the book about the area, you had a hard time finding crime to include in the book. That's just mind-boggling, of course.
Well, we were trying to, get everything covered we could. We did the schools, we did the history, the media people that lived in South Jackson, Woody Asap, Burt Kay, Dick Miller. I mean, it's really incredible. The writers that came out of South Jackson.
Farmer Jim Neal, right?
Oh, yeah. We covered all that bunch in there. So we wanted to see any famous criminals, and we just looked and looked and looked. And really, there was some petty crime. That was about it.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, one thing, there's a chapter in the book on the churches of South Jackson called God's South Jackson. And at the time, we were thinking about, let's find the notorious stuff. There had to have been some bootlegging somewhere, something, and we'll call that the Devil's South Jackson. But we
just go look.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
people don't realize how large South Jackson was. At one time, it was the largest precinct in Mississippi, voting precinct.
That's right.
Didn't know that.
Level Woods. Sure. If you would have carved South Jackson off from the rest of Jackson in 1970, and that's with the 1970 boundaries, which would have been down around McClure Road, I think South Jackson probably would have been about the fifth largest or maybe fourth largest community in Mississippi.
Huh.
It kind of had a relation like Brooklyn to New York.
Yeah, sure. So, Doug, you, of course, served as a city commissioner.
I was the first person elected from South Jackson.
Okay.
In the history of the Jackson City Council.
Okay, and at that time, the form of government was different, right?
Commission form of government.
Right. We had a mayor and three commissioners.
Two commissioners, excuse me. Total of three. My bad. At what time did we convert to the present council form of government? It was about 12 years after that.
Okay.
After 73 when I got out. So I'd say
it was about 1985.
Okay,
and you could see the commission form of government was very efficient and it ran very well. You had all these years with very little. There was no corruption in city government.
Yeah.
Alan Thompson ran a tight ship. And you knew when you went to the ward-type system, you were going to get some ward-type politics, but I don't think anybody envisioned what we got, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So you served with Alan Thompson, Russell Davis?
Alan Thompson went I was with Russell.
Okay.
Russell came in right after Alan.
Okay.
He was there with Ed Cates.
Yeah.
And I basically took, when Ed Cates did whatever he did, I was the next member of the city council.
I got you.
Now, that was a banknote. Ed Cates, I'm the only elected, I'm real proud of this, I'm the only elected official in Hinds County that didn't go to either one of his funerals. He was not a good guy.
No.
He was not a good guy.
No, I get it. All right, so Vince, you were talking about, speaking of lawyers, Bobby DeLauder.
Right.
Tell us about that, the connection.
First off, when we were growing up in South Jackson, and I went to St. Joe, I was a few years ahead of you.
Yep.
People in North Jackson thought of South Jackson as, well, that's where the rednecks live. That's the lower classes and stuff, and, the Klan country. But Byron De La Beckwith went for almost 3 decades after murdering Medgar Evers, a free man. And it was Bobby DeLauder who grew up in South Jackson, went to Oak Forest Baptist Church, was educated at Witten Junior High, Wingfield High School. He's the one who finally brought that Klan terrorist down. And also, from what Doug has told me, because he knew some of the old policemen, it was because some of the policemen who had come from South Jackson had meticulously saved all of the evidence after the mistrials in the mid to late 60s, in Byron De La Beckwith's case. They carefully put the rifle away to where it could later be used. And so the area of town that people looked down on was the area that helped bring down Byron De La Beckwith.
Yeah. And it's truly an interesting irony. Something else you talk about, Doug, in the book is the Carmelite Monastery in South Jackson. Now, I know, Vince, you were just talking about that being such an old structure. But you know what I remember about it, growing up as a Catholic and an altar boy, was that's where they made all the hosts. That's what my understanding was. Is that true? That's what they told us.
That probably was. And they were active in various things. The main thing about the monastery people need to know, it was not a monastery until 1951. It was a plantation house built around 1845.
It's incredible.
And a family that came ultimately from South Carolina. They were descendants of French Huguenots, which were, French Protestants who had to escape France because of persecution. One of the Morant daughters married a man in Mississippi who was a legislator, who was Catholic, and two of her sons became priests. So I'm thinking,
how about that?
But the Morant family built that monastery, the house, and had about 600 acres. It was an area, too. I think some of the early Civil War action took place around there.
Yeah,
they staged the Battle of Jackson from right around there.
Yeah, Grant came right down Belvedere Drive. Sherman did anyway. And that's why I found out that Lynch Street was not named after J.R. Lynch.
Okay.
Because a lieutenant came up to Sherman and said, "General, we can take Jackson. The Lynch Creek Bridge is open." And that's how they ran into Jackson. They took Jackson the first time. Lynch was a former governor, and he had a plantation there, and that was Lynch Street, which became Lynch Creek, which became Lynch Street.
Okay.
And later on at some time, it just got to be J.R. Lynch Street.
Okay, which of course leads directly into Jackson State University.
Yeah,
right.
And who, just being a nut about history in Jackson, he may have been the greatest Mississippian ever, J.R. Lynch. He was really quite a human being. His career is amazing, and somebody needs to really do a good biography of him because what he did was incredible.
Wow.
He was the first person, first African American to hold an elected position or a judicial position. He was the first one appointed. He's 21 years old, and he was appointed by Alcorn to be a justice of the peace. And he was that for about 6 months, and then he ran for the legislature and became Speaker of the House.
I'll be darned. I also got to bring up, I know you have a serious connection to the game of baseball. Obviously, he's a baseball coach at the high school and at the college level. Mm-hmm. And, of course, I remember the American Legion days in Battlefield Park. So Battlefield Park, right, is because there was a battle there. Is that right?
Well,
or around the area? And that's not far from the monastery.
That's exactly right. Battlefield Park, and this is something that I learned from Doug when we were doing the research for the book, that the person, probably the most famous person in terms of tennis in the United States, in terms of making it a sport for the masses, lived in Altawoods, Slew Hester.
Yeah, sure.
And
tennis.
He used to hold tournaments at Battlefield Park, and it was a state-of-the-art tennis court in the early 50s. And Slew is the one who personally moved the United States Tennis Open out of Forest Hills to Flushing Meadows.
Yeah.
And, here, a guy in South Jackson.
Yeah.
Great guy, too.
I met him when he was around, and I didn't know that he was from South Jackson, honestly.
He was on one street, then you had the IUs right next to him, and Woody Asap, then you come around, you got Dick Miller.
I know exactly where you're talking about. I just didn't know Slew was part of that, and was a long-time member, of course, at River Hills in his later years.
According to his daughter, he wanted...
his daughter is Katie Hester.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's Slew's oldest girl.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Sherwood Wise, who was active in Altawoods, moved out to Eastover.
Okay.
And he wanted Slew to move with him, and Slew was going to do it until his daughter said, "Dad, I'm at Peoples. I like where I am. I like the schools here."
Yeah.
So he stayed in South Jackson for his daughter. But one more person I got to plug who from South Jackson, and she recorded a song or two with the Rolling Stones and may have been the woman who was the inspiration for Honky Tonk Woman, and that was Nanette Workman.
Okay.
She lived around over by Jackson Square. Went to Provine when you were there. In fact, got Doug all excited when she sang "Fever."
I was a sophomore in high school, and we were at our first assembly, and this girl sang "Fever," which is a pretty risque song, and I was kind of taken by it myself. And anyway, she was Nanette, and she was a neat person. But boy, she was headed to Broadway. It didn't take her but three more years, and she was there.
She's sort of the Madonna of Canada, very popular Canadian singer. She was actually born in New York City, and her parents came down when she was about 2 or 3 years old. She used to appear on Jackson television Mr. Science or something when she
Yeah.
was a kid. But later, she was with Teen Tempos.
Teen Tempos, yeah.
Teen Tempos.
You remember that?
I do remember it well. So I had a brother who passed away in 1976, but was in a band called the Chevrons, a local rock band, and played, of course, on Teen Tempo and the Shady Oaks and the club circuits and stuff. But yeah, who could forget all that stuff? Judy Moon, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Hill Denson and our close
Yeah,
friends.
and of course, baseball coach at USM.
Yeah, we have a
And
little.
Callaway before that. I played when he was coaching at Callaway.
Yeah.
So
He ain't changed a bit.
I
either.
know, awesome, great people. You know, it's been a pleasure having you gentlemen on and reminiscing about South and West Jackson. We are blessed with a lot of great people that came from the area, and you two are among them. And we appreciate you coming on.
We've
you very
enjoyed
much.
it very
Yeah.
much.
And all the luck in the world on the book. I've read some of it. It's fantastic. Thanks for doing that. We'll talk soon. Middays. We'll take a break right here.